All right, everybody, it is 11:03. We're going to go ahead and get started. My name's Kate. I'm going to be your DJ today. And with me is Rob McCoy. Rob, do you want to say hello?
Hello. Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. Rob, can you tell the audience a little bit about your background before we get started?
I'm sure. I'm National Sales Manager for Holganix, but before that, I actually started off as a lawn care technician 23 years ago, I guess 24 now, and worked my way through the industry, running lawn care companies, owning lawn care companies, and now have the privilege of working with a lot of lawn care companies and kind of picking their brain and understanding what's working and what's not working for them. And I'm happy to share that information with you and hopefully save you some of that pain and anguish of figuring it out on your own.
Awesome. So there are a bunch of you guys on just before we get started. So you're all on mute. If you have any questions, please throw them into the GoToWebinar control panel on the tab that says questions. At some points, I'll break in and ask your questions right away. At others, I'll save them for the end. But with that, Rob,
Yeah,
I'll let you go ahead.
Please put your questions in because I want to make sure that each individual scenario is addressed because there's a lot of different places in the country that we have represented. So if you have anything that is specific to you and what you're trying to do this fall and what you've done, I want to make sure that we get you pointed in a good direction.
Awesome. So with that, Rob, I'll let you take over.
All right, I'm taking over whether you like it or not. So as you can see on the screen, there's some disclaimers to consider. And, you know, we can't go into an exact detail of, hey, this is the program that you should be running for your fall program, because the fall means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And everybody hasn't run the same program up to this point and is not seeing the same results up to this point. So, you know, we have to make some assumptions that you possibly have a normal weather pattern coming up, and that the applications are done correctly. Your soil testing will give you some direction, and I believe that you should have random soil tests done several times a year, just to see what your nutrient levels are at and to see if there's anything that is consistently off, even outside of your standard nutrients. You know, if you have extremely high manganese levels, for example, there may be something to pay attention to. And remember, I'm not going to be speaking specifically to a region, but if you have questions specific about your region, I'm happy to answer those. Another thing is that I don't know what equipment you're using. So when you ask me a question, I may ask that in return, just because there's definitely different products that work better with different equipment. So we want to make sure that we maximize that aspect of it as well. And lastly, if you want to build a program that has Holganix in it, we're happy to help you. So you can request it in the chat box. You can contact me later, or if you're already in contact with your rep, then you can contact them and they'll be happy to help you out with that. So this is a really simple breakdown of what we're going to go through. We're going to go through the questions, which seems backwards, but it's the questions that you have to ask yourself in order to plan out a good fall program. The process for building it, what you should evaluate first, and then actually building the program. So some of the questions that we want to look at. What's your soil telling you? I'd mentioned, you know, the importance of getting soil tests. Regardless of the number of customers that you have, you probably want to get some soil tests, even a small percentage, just to see if there's anything consistent in there. What applications have provided the best or worst results in the past? And we're specifically talking about the fall. That's what we're planning for. So have you seen great performance from certain fertilizers in the fall? Have you seen great root development or seed germination for those of you that are going to be including aeration and overseeding into the packages with some of your customers? And what time of year do you receive the most cancel requests? And along with that, what are the cancel requests for? When's the best time to get referrals? I think the fall is a phenomenal time to get referrals, especially if you are successful so far this season, and you're able to maximize on the opportunity of, hey, our lawns look good, our competitors' lawns don't, because if anybody's lawns aren't going to look good, now is the time where they're not going to look good. And then, of course, what are your growth plans for your business? Because if you're planning on, building a marketing campaign and dedicating more sales in the fall season, then it has to be very streamlined. It has to be easily communicated what your program is, what the results are that they can expect. So we're going to dive into each one of these. So soil testing, there's a bunch of different versions of soil tests that you can use. The purpose that we're looking at is really just to make sure that your levels are in a good spot. We're primarily talking about your NPK, and because you want to make sure that you have a fertilizer that will get you into the proper zones of production for that turf. Because especially if you're going to be putting seed down, you want to make sure that you're able to maximize that and have the nutrients available for that new seed. A lot of people automatically think in the fall season that you're going to ratchet up your potassium and phosphorus in your analysis of your fertilizers. It really depends on where the soil test sits. I mean, a phosphate can sit in the soil for a long time. Same thing with potassium. And, you may have used, I was just talking with a customer the other day that was using a 0052 in combination with their nitrogen. And I guarantee they're not going to need more come the fall. It's like I said before, there's a million different ways that you can do a program. It's really how you adjust to it that, makes you a professional. Because you can start off the season any way that you want. The spring is usually going to be pretty accommodating. The summer is going to get difficult, and you need to be able to make adjustments and through the summer and the fall to, keep up those results that you're looking for. So pay attention to the soil tests. In my opinion, you need at least 10 of them. Keep them random. Don't only look at the lawns that are performing well, but make sure that which lawns are performing well, so that if there is a difference, you can see it in the soil test and might identify something that you need to make an adjustment for the rounds coming up. So I kind of went into this, at least 10 of your properties, vary the locations, make adjustments on your rounds to ensure the results through the rest of the year. So when we think about the best and worst results, I have the opportunity to build a lot of lawn care programs with a lot of different customers. And the first question I always ask is, so what did you do before? So the reason that after we identify all the applications, what was done in all the applications, then we go into performance. Say, what did you see that was the factor that would make somebody refer you business? That's usually the point that I want to look at. If there's a result that someone is going to refer a new customer to you because the result's so good, that's the result that we're looking for. So it could be the color, it could be how well your weed control performs, it could be in the fall season, it could be how fast your seed germinated, or how much you got a lawn to thicken up. maybe even that you just never had disease issues. And it depends on where you are in the country as to how much of a disease pressure issue you have. But it could be any of those factors. You want to make sure that if you have something that's really working, that you can build around that. And then the bad applications or the bad results that you see, you really have to drill down on them because you don't know if it's because of a technician error, if it's because of a different piece of equipment being used with the same type of product. But you want to make sure that you look at that. There's also different soil types and different subdivisions. So you want to narrow that down, see if there's any consistencies, or if it is just, hey, that application wasn't up to par. We thought it was what we needed, but we obviously don't want to do that again. And then something to make sure that you understand is everybody has a plan when they go into the season. Mike Tyson actually said it best. Everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. But the weather punches us in the face every year. It is never what we expect. There's always some different variation, some combination of weather circumstances that will provide a different scenario. And, we're constantly trying to hit a moving target. So don't ever think that you're really going to be able to settle into a program and just do it the way that you planned. There's always going to be adjustments to be made. You just want it to be adjustments that are that you actually get to stay ahead of. That's one of the reasons why you want to use a soil test, is because the soil test can show you what's happening before the customer sees any change. You can mask a lot of things early on, and then eventually the soil quality is going to catch up with you, and you're going to have to make those adjustments. And you want to make sure that the customer is not calling in to let you know, hey, by the way, I'm seeing this. You want to see it before they do. Cancels are really important. And when we're talking about bad applications, you can get a lot of information from cancel requests. I would pull a cancel report every month and see where we can improve. A lot of times companies don't really want to look at the cancels because it's like the worst news that you can possibly have. But if somebody's canceling their service, look at it as a learning opportunity. Make sure that you have a chance to speak with them, ask them what they would change about the service, because you're really just trying to get better every year and every season. So take the time to work with them. And usually if they know that you are working to get better, a lot of times they'll give you another opportunity, or if they go and try somebody else and it's the same result, they're going to go back to the company that actually cared to understand the problem. But frankly, if you just use it for selfish reasons, make sure you get as much information as you can from them, because there's a lot to learn there. And then on the opposite side of it, if it's a good time to grow your business, then take advantage of it. And what I mean by that is, if you're going to invest in sales and marketing, if you're going to invest dollars into that, time into that, manpower into that, then make sure that you are investing into the products that you're going to put down at that time to know that they're going to perform. Because the worst thing that you could do is that you are investing all this money to grow your business and the results don't show that anybody should take your business. So you want to make sure that part of it is not skipped. If you're looking at a fall marketing campaign to grow your business, maybe because COVID set you back, or you were on a great pace at the beginning of the season and then COVID hit and it just kind of stalled, and your projections for the end of the year, you need to have a good fall push. Well, that's fine, but make sure that you understand that's an investment across the board. You invest in your marketing, you invest in your sales team, you also invest in your production and the products that you're putting down to make sure that you can get the referrals, or you can say, yeah, we want your business, and look at the result we could produce versus what everybody else could produce, and that you're putting out a good product at that point in time, because people are going to make a very quick decision. So you want to make sure that your fall program is rock solid, because you can really make a ton of improvement for a brand new customer, even more so than what you can do in the spring. I always preferred selling customers in the fall versus the spring, because I felt as though in the spring it was really more of like a political campaign. It was that you were making a bunch of promises and that you weren't really 100% sure that you could deliver on, and a lot of it was based around price. Versus in the fall, there's just so many more resources that are available to you. You can completely transform a lawn in the fall, whereas in the spring it's a lot of preparation of, where you're getting your weeds under control and things like that. In the fall, you can get the weeds under control, you can get the lawn greened up, you can get new seed down, you can transform that lawn in a few months, where you don't have that opportunity in other times of the year. So the process, we want to look at the nutrients. So we talked about the soil test, what nutrients are needed, what nutrient, and if your soil tests come back and there's nothing, glaringly obvious there, what nutrients do you want to focus on? I had mentioned before that there's, most of the time people want to put a little bit more potassium and phosphorus into their program. I agree with that. You just got to make sure that the soil tests that you pull justify that. If they're already there, then it's not necessary to put it in. It may be a factor of how do we make those nutrients available, and without sounding like there's a sales pitch in here, you may have to use something like a Bio 800 to get nutrients available just because they're locked up in the soil, even though they're there in quantities that are completely acceptable. What weed controls do you need to focus on? If you still have lingering weeds, you need to get them under control early on in this fall process. So it's definitely the time of year where you don't go out with a general idea of we're just going to put down a 3-way herbicide at this point because that's going to kill the majority of the weeds. You probably already killed those weeds. You may have to look at some of the specific controls that are needed for the weeds that are left. And that could be different for anybody based on what you used before, based on the weather pattern, based on your location. So you want to make sure that you really look at the specifics on weed controls, and it may be time to, dial it in. If you got an extreme nuts edge problem, you may need to focus on that. If you're still dealing with crabgrass, you may need to deal with that before some of your other applications. But it all depends on how you want to build that program. The crabgrass is kind of a tough pill to swallow at this point in the season, because a lot of the weed controls that you're going to use for crabgrass, for example, it depends on the tiller stage that the grass is in as to whether it's actually going to control it or not. You may knock it back a little bit and then it's going to come back, and it's kind of a waste of money. But if you build a program that has a different time frame of expectation, then you may be able to not even have to spend the money on the weed controls, because you know that based on seasonality, some of those weeds are going to die off automatically. Look at the missing soil components. If I mentioned before, if you have some micronutrients that are completely out of whack, if the pH level is off, definitely things that you want to consider to maximize the transformation period that the fall can be. It's not just about maintenance in the fall. It's really about the opportunity to do a reconstruction on a lawn or drastically improve the results that you've been dealing with on certain properties. Seasonal pressures. If you're running with high humidity right now, you're obviously going to have more disease pressure. How long is that going to last? It may be something that it's not only possibly something that you have to take care of, but it may also be a sales opportunity. Not just on selling someone a fungicide, but selling someone on the idea that, hey, we can fix this problem that you had that maybe you had nothing to do with. Maybe it's not your customer and it's a new customer. It may not be a problem that you need to address right now. It may be that you have to address how to repair their lawn from some of those seasonal pressures. Consider your application methods. What I mean by that is, are you on, a ride-on sprayer spreader? Are you pulling hose? Are you pushing spreaders? Different things like that. There's different products that are going to be easier to use. And then your budget, of course. And notice the budgets last. There's a reason for the budget being last, and I'm going to actually save that for last. But you want to make sure that you get your ideal scenario in there. So on the nutrients, I'd mentioned a bunch of these, but here's, just kind of a recap on it. The nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and the micronutrients. The liquid fertilizers do give you more flexibility. And what I mean by that is, and I use the term making a cocktail a lot, because it really is that you're making a cocktail that can change from one day to the next. So if you have your nutrient packages separated, say that you have a nitrogen source and you have a phosphorus source, and you realize I'm going to have to bring up the phosphorus source and bring down the nitrogen source, you can do that from one day to the next, versus with a granular, you're locked into the analysis. So if you're at a point where you're analyzing which way should you go, liquid definitely gives you more flexibility. And also the other thing that a lot of people miss often, because you're looking for a certain amount of, we'll use nitrogen because it's the most common thing. You're looking to put down a certain amount of pounds of nitrogen, but you're not looking at the source of the nitrogen. There's a big difference between how fast different nitrogen sources are available, how long different nitrogen sources are going to last, and also the quality that you're going to get out of that nitrogen source. There's a big difference between using a urea and a methylated urea. If you're using a trizone, you have different availability, different release timing, that can really dial in the result that you're looking for, so that you're not kind of looking back at it later on and thinking to yourself, well, we put down the right amounts. Why are we not getting the result that we expected? Weed control, we went over this, but something to consider is the overlap. Also, if you're doing seeding, it becomes a big factor as the timing. You're not going to be able to put weed control down in the time where you have new grass seed down, because there's so much more money that's invested into that new grass seed. You don't want to cause a problem with the germination there. So, in the past, I have seen companies be really successful with hitting the weeds hard in the spring, and then one application before they are ready to start doing aeration and seedings in the fall, because you're going to have new weeds pop up. You're going to have a different batch of weeds come up, and you need to make sure that you get those under control so that the new seed that's trying to emerge is not competing with the weed seeds that are inevitably going to win, just because they're so much more aggressive. Something else while we're on that topic, and because I was bringing up the seeding, really pay attention to the tag on the grass seed that you're purchasing. Look at that percentage of weed seed that's in there. You don't want to promote a problem that you're going to be responsible for taking care of. If you are already using Holganix products, specifically if you're using a Bio 800 product, you're already maximizing the germination that you're going to get from your seed. So you want to make sure that you're not going to maximize the germination from a weed seed. So spend a little bit more money on the type of seed that you're getting and put it down at a slightly lower rate, so that you can, look at the combination of the program there and get the best result without killing yourself on spending top dollar on multiple items. The service calls, one of the worst things, there's 2 times a year when in a program where service calls really will hurt you. In the spring, when you're bringing on new customers, it's really inconvenient to have service calls because your routes can be a little bit disheveled at that point anyway. But when you are coming into a time of year where the weeds should have already been taken care of, they may be running rampant on certain lawns. You do not want to have to go out there on multiple visits to get all the weeds taken care of. So going back to what I previously said about the weed control and being more precise at this time of the year than kind of just trying to take care of the general population of weeds. You may have to combine more than one weed control at a time right now because you really don't have that long window to take care of the weeds, depending upon how your program's built. You may need to hit it with one application that is going to take care of multiple things that are hard to take care of. You may have ground ivy, wild strawberry, things like that have waxy coating on the leaf and just don't typically die with one application of general weed control. And you're going to have to use something more specific to get those under control so that you can take advantage of that transformation period in the fall. I mentioned the pH level when we were looking at the soil components. pH is very easy to adjust. It just takes a long time to do it. Typically when you're applying fertilizers, you're going to have to apply a lime at some point in time to correct the pH level in the soil. But make sure you have it tested, because that's not just a foregone conclusion that, hey, my program, because I have this much nitrogen in it or this much fertilizer in it, I'm going to have to do a lime treatment. But if you're going to bring it into your program, the tail end of the season is typically the right time to do it, because it's going to take 3 to 4 months to change the pH level in the soil if you're using lime. Another thing is cation exchange capacity. It depends on the type of soil test that you get, but cation exchange capacity is something that a lot of people don't know about that is extremely important, and it's the ability for the soil to hold and store cations. And what that really means is how available is the nutrients in the soil, how available are they to the plant? Or are they just there and they're eventually going to leach through the soil? So if you are deciding on which type of soil test to have administered, see if you can get a CEC reading on the soil test. That might be something that you find interesting, because I'll tell you, with the customers that I've worked with where they were running a synthetic program and then they switched over to more of a hybrid program, one of the things was that they were putting down a tremendous amount of nutrients, but they weren't getting the performance out of it. And some of those nutrients are still in the soil, but they were just locked up and not available to the plant. So you want to make sure that CEC is good, and in some cases you can get an adjustment on that. Seasonal pressures, we talked about this. You could be dealing with disease right now. 'Tis the season. I see disease everywhere I'm driving. I see disease on lawns, and it's a lot of different disease. But I'm in the tri-state area, and we're in a transition zone, so it's going to be more obvious with the heat and humidity that we have right now. So you want to make sure that you are not just paying attention to how to fix that if it needs to be fixed, but also having more of a long-term plan so that you can get someone's lawn back into shape. The occasional weeds, drought. There's a lot of drought right now. So what are you doing to have those lawns pull out of the drought in a healthy manner? How is the water retention affected by what you're putting down in the lawns? So different seasonal pressures to consider there. And then application methods, liquid versus granular versus doing both. You want to understand which products are going to work better for your equipment. And if you don't, then you should definitely talk to a rep so that you can kind of pick their brain on it and make sure you have something that is going to work for you. and that you're not putting a square peg into a round hole. And spray volume. Spray volume is a factor that gets overlooked a lot. There's definitely benefits to having a higher spray volume, not just because of the penetration of the products into the soil, because you have more of a carrier, but the weed control, frankly, just works better when you have a higher spray volume, and it can reduce your drift. Budget. Okay, so we went through all the different agronomic factors to consider. Now we have to consider the budget. So you want to make sure that you have a budget ahead of time, but you don't want to compare the budget with the program as you're doing it. It's very difficult to do that, and you may make sacrifices where you don't need to make sacrifices if you do it that way. So you want to create a budget, and then you want to create your agronomic program, and then you want to compare them after you have the ideal scenario for both. Because I always find it easier to design the program and say, this is exactly what I think we need for our customers to maximize the results. And then look at it as a whole and understand, all right, so if I need to reduce my budget, I can use, based on the type of fertilizer that I'm using, I can keep the rate on this application. On the next application, I can drop it because I know there's going to be a residual effect there of that fertilizer lasting longer. There's a lot of different ways to build a program. One of the most interesting things is that, you can really take advantage of low budget applications based on what came before that. Everybody thinks that a high budget program is always going to perform better. It's not always that. A high budget program is going to perform better than a low budget one, but a mid-range budget program can perform just as well as a high budget program if it's balanced correctly. So something to take into consideration there. And when you're looking at your COGS, your cost of goods, you should be in the 20 to 25% range. And that's, I've built programs with that in mind. When somebody says, hey, this is what our price point is, so this is where we have to come in at, you still go through that same methodology of, all right, I'm going to build the program, I understand the budget, and then I'm going to go back and compare and make sure I fall in that range. I have seen it as high as 30%, and I've seen people be successful with it at 30%. The reason for that is you can have a cost of goods that's high if you are getting referrals because of it, or say that you have a great referral program and you want to take advantage of the cost that you put into your program. You make sure that those customers are referring you business, because that's really a marketing and sales expense rather than just an additional product expense. If it's a way that you're able to maximize and get customers from that and get additional work from it, then it's probably worth it. And it's always better to scale back from your ideal program than to try and balance the agronomics and the budget simultaneously. So if we go back and look at this, we want to make sure that we're asking all the questions that we're planning for based on the information that we found out. Understand the order in which you're building your program. So soil first, nutrients next, weed controls, and then additional needs. And additional needs in this fall season is going to be something that's specific, like seeding. That's obviously going to play a factor into what you can do with your other applications, possibly what application gets done with an aeration and overseeding. Anytime that you sell an additional service to your program, from the business perspective, you want it done at the same time as another application will be done. So if they can complement each other, that's fantastic. I always loved putting down a starter fertilizer in the round that would be at the same time as the aeration and overseeding. But the problem that we would run into was we would sell so much aeration and overseeding that it actually spanned 2 rounds, and it was actually half of one round one complete round and then half of another round because of the timing of that aeration and overseeding. So you couldn't really do an expensive fertilizer, starter fertilizer for that whole time period when it wasn't budgeted in for that whole time period. So you want to target it and make sure that you are able to take advantage of the result that you'll get there. And then at the end, just balance and adjust for the budget. This is where it gets complicated. You know, there's always sacrifices in there. But, you know, if you build the ideal agronomic program for yourself and for your area, then it's easy to come down from that. You're going to have sacrifices that aren't going to be such extreme sacrifices. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for being on. And my contact information is up on the screen. Feel free to reach out to me if you need. And thanks for sharing some time with us today.